Welcome back, folks, to another episode of High Tech. You've got Josh and Will back here for another round. We're excited this week to kind of get literary. We've got a little bit of a theme, I think.
Books.
Yeah.
New technology.
The newest.
They're like, man, they've ran out of ideas. By this episode, they've moved from good apps and tech to books.
We went back in space. No, and we're gonna tie it all together, I think. But I remember I got I got the first generation Kindle. Have you ever seen one of those?
Oh yeah.
My godmother got it for me.
I'm a little older than you, remember, man? Yeah.
Oh, 13 months or something. I don't even know. No, I guess you're January. I'm September, so it's what's math? 21 months older than me.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
That's just enough time to have seen the early Kindle. and Fire for the first time.
And Fire. Were you part of coming up with that one too? You were the one rubbing the sticks together?
Anyway, I'm glad we're really on topic.
Did you meet the guy who made the wheel? Were you there for that?
Yeah. It was crazy, man. Insane times.
The jokes must have been rolling after that.
Oh, that was... If they weren't that bad. That was a bad one. That was...
So we're going to start this episode out with a quick conversation about favorite books. I mean, there's just so much, I think, that you can find in a book. And I think just looking at Josh and my couple of notes here, we went fiction. We went total just pleasure books, fiction.
Yeah. Like, I have a lot of, obviously books that I love in the space I'm reading right now, work-wise, and... for me, theology and stuff like that. But when it comes to favorite book, I'm an escapist. I like to escape,
Oh yeah.
So those books are nice, but they make me think.
Right.
So that's effort.
and probably one of my more recent professional books that I really fell in love with was the Handbook of Distance Education, and that's not something you sit down to read. You gotta
don't
read
just
it.
sit down for the weekend and
just
pump
flipping
that out
through the Handbook of Distance Education. No, you go back to it. It's a reference book. So for pleasure, I gotta say the Lord of the Rings books. I had some difficulty reading them. They're definitely in the top for me. I mean, there's just such a deep, rich lore to them. The Harry Potters were my first. The Harry Potter book 1 was the thing that got me into reading myself voraciously.
Okay.
I grew up with 1 or 2 books that my parents helped me read, and I was interested in as a kid. But Harry Potter, I got the first book. You couldn't stop me. But right now, my favorite book and series is absolutely Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's just such a farce. It's so absurd. But it's a lot of fun. He's always looking at weird things and perceiving the world in a different way. So I'm really enjoying that right now.
Those are good choices. I mean, I have not actually read Hitchhiker's Guide. I've watched the movie. I know the movie
pretty much the same thing,
like the back of my hand. Only because as a teenager, I got grounded once and couldn't watch TV, and I had an iPod that had Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on it, and I watched that religiously.
Oh my!
It was the only thing I could watch. And that was a sad story. So I'm going to move on from that and go to my book. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a huge nerd. It's such a surprise to Will. To those of you listening who may not know me that well, it might be a surprise. You may have thought I was a jock.
Kelsey,
you can't see me. And if you could, it would be evident. But but for me, I love Lord of the Rings. I read Lord of the Rings a ton, but I won't pick that one because I feel like that's just assumed under being a nerd. You should like Lord of the Rings. If you don't, that's a problem. But for me, once I've been obsessed with that got me back into doing more fiction reading in college was an author by the name of Brandon Sanderson. And if for some reason he ever listens to this podcast, which would be incredible, I love his writing. Okay. It's so good. When you talk about lore, this guy built an entire universe of planets that his books take place on, and they all are interconnected. I don't know what he does, if he just draws maps of story in his room and does them, but recently he's got a second to newest one in a series called the Stormlight Archive called Oathbringer. It was really liked that book. It was solid. It's a good story. I would try to explain it, but it's not worth our time.
Before we
So
got started tonight, he was pulling a book off his shelf in the background and showing me. It's like these Brandon Sanderson books. You could. It's like a
keep getting
Nextel
bigger.
phone.
Yeah, they're like,
Hey, old man, do you remember the Nextel
yes, I
phones?
do. Yeah, they
Yeah,
were crazy.
exactly.
New tech. Yeah, no, I mean it's like 1,300 pages long, something like that, and not big text. Like it is like a Bible.
You drop that on your
Currently.
foot. You're gonna lose a
Yeah,
toe.
it is not a book to be messed around with. But yeah, I really like his books. I think he does a good job of like not just writing good story, but like writing worlds and like crafting worlds um in just like really creative ways. So that has been a book that I'm quite enjoying.
Well, and I know between us, we share a lot of like topical interests. So Lord of the Rings. Josh and I have gotten together and watched them a number of
I
times.
watch them every year, okay?
Extended
Every
Blu-ray.
extended Blu-ray
We just saw an IMAX release a couple months
of
ago
of
of
Fellowship.
Fellowship, but it takes a lot for us to kind of decide, right? I mean, every book you jump into, every series you jump into, you got to determine whether or not it's good enough for you. And like Josh and my, I think criteria is probably going to focus really on that deep lore and that detail. Like
Yeah.
if it's rich, if it's and that's something that I liked about Harry Potter and the books. It set it up really well, but now it's gone further with like Fantastic Beasts and some of the stuff that J.K. Rowling is building up around the main storyline. Every time I dip a toe into Lord of the Rings field, I learn something about it I didn't know. Whether
Yeah.
it's about why he wrote something, or why the character was that way, or how Sam perceived Frodo. Like every time I watch it, there we watch the extended edition, every time. So we're watching 4 hours of content. There's always something I miss that I'm
Yeah.
just like, wow, did you notice how he did that or how he said
I
that?
wish I could still say that about the movies, but I think I've seen them enough now. Like when we watched the Fellowship in IMAX, it was not the extendeds. And guys, I have not watched the regular theatrical version of a Lord of the Rings movie in probably I don't know, like a decade.
Ever
I mean, like it's been a while.
since you saw it in theaters the
Like
first
since I
time?
saw it in theaters, I guess. So like I'm sitting there watching the movie and I hit a sad moment where I realized, hey, this is where my extended disc changes over to disc 2. That's how many times I've watched it. I know exactly the line and I know exactly the moments that the extended scenes were missing. Because I've seen it that many times. I once wrote a college paper while watching the entire extended editions of Lord of the Rings. It was not my best paper, but I sure had fun while writing it. So
Now, the crossover here, I think, is the fact that we spend a lot of time working through these things and evaluating the best media. And when it's entertainment, it's easy to do that. You don't even think about that. But with our work, we have to do that very intentionally with apps. And to kick off our conversation this week, we really want to kind of dig into some of the things that Josh and I perceive are critical to picking the best app, picking the best book. What do you like? It's that easy, right?
yeah.
Ed tech app. Sometimes folks get pulled in by the marketing. They
Oh
get
yeah,
pulled in
absolutely.
by what it looks like or that they think they like it.
So like to bring this around, right? Yeah, like the whole don't judge a book by its cover. Common problem in ed tech is that we judge books by their covers. We take a look at what the tool says it's going to do. We get 5 seconds in it, and then we start designing activities around it. And we don't carefully evaluate whether it's actually good. It has substance, to what it does. And also, I'd just like to pause for a second, guys. Can we just those of you listening appreciate the transition that Will and I just pulled off? Okay, we were talking about books and we just transitioned into tech apps. Okay, I feel like that was a moment we need to recognize. We won't do this commonly all the time, but
All
we're
right,
doing
Deadpool.
this. Okay,
Breaking the fourth wall
breaking the
here.
fourth wall. Yes. Okay, back to ed tech. Sorry, I was proud of us. We did a good thing.
I was working so hard in my mind, literally looking to our notes, be like, all right, that word, okay, that word, all right, I can do this. I can make this happen. We got there. Yeah, but it's not even just contrived, right? The whole point of the similarities are important for evaluating apps, evaluating the things we like. Now, I actually want to turn the conversation off to Josh to lead some of the things that he's doing at his institution and some of the resources he's pulled up that help him make the decisions because he's actually a decision maker in some of the space right now.
Yeah,
I'm a consultant to faculty
yeah,
in many ways, right? So I don't tell them to use it or not to use it. I give them pros cons. It works out. But I wanted to kind of start with this little story um, of a recent interaction with a faculty member where we have an ed tech transition at my institution. And so we've had something in place and that's going away and we're picking up a new thing. Well, the old thing was working really well. And I could see some people who used it well. And some of the people who are coming into the new thing are looking at it saying, okay, it does fancy things. I'm interested. I actually am happy to every time point back to the first person I got using the tool and say, well, this is actually the way to do it. We did the evaluation. We went through a lot of the steps we're going to hear with Josh today. We determined it was a good tool for the purpose, and then it worked out pedagogically. As I saw it happen in her classroom, as I watched her teach with this tool, 10 out of 10. She didn't just use the tool to get data. She didn't just use the tool to add grades. She didn't just use the tool to make things more efficient for herself. As she used the tool and got responses from the students, she took those responses and live in class would extend that from the students. All right, Joe, you said blah, blah, blah in the response. Take it further. Tell me a little bit more. Oh, and then if something wasn't going on the spot or it wasn't jiving, she'd be like, all right, that's fine, Joe. If you don't got something, I want you to ask Anthony because Anthony had a really great response, right? So as the responses are coming into this teacher, the tool was facilitating all this, but it still relied on her using it so well to engage her students across one another and with herself. It, I I get excited thinking about that classroom. Like she just did it so well, and that to me is what we want to see. We don't do these evaluations to keep things out of people's hands or to stop people from having successful opportunities. We do these evaluations to ensure that the thing that's going into your hands is the best for the practice, and then we still need to be a part of good practices once we get to the
yeah.
classroom or the online experience. So that's my little story. Tossing it over to Josh. What
Yeah.
do you got to help us start to
Yeah.
evaluate?
So, and for context, like I think there's two pieces to this evaluation conversation. One, we've referenced, at least I hope we've referenced, depending on how we did editing of our videos or our episodes, is like this context of evaluating whether you should use a tool, like integrating it, things like that. But there's kind of another level to evaluating tools that I've found that goes beyond just like integration um, paradigms, like the things that we talk about, where, is the tool, what are we doing with it? Are we integrating into our course? There's also just like a basic level that often I find is skipped in education, which is like, is, is this good? Is this going to become a hurdle? And that depends. Like for context, what Will's talking about, like as a decision maker, I do kind of both. When in our situation, we have online courses, and then we also have like what we call our traditional courses, instructors teaching face to face. And when it comes to like instructors teaching face to face, I'm more of a consultant space in that area. Like I can't tell them they can't use a tool in their classroom, or tell them they should or anything like that. I consult and maybe help integrate if we have time to do that. When it comes to online, I am absolutely the doorkeeper of what this should look like. And I think when it comes to the apps, we just have to carefully evaluate not just do they meet our teaching practices, but are they good technology? Are they good apps? Do they create problems for the students? Um, are they accessible tools? And there's just a couple different things you have to look at. Is this going to make the student's life more complicated based on a couple of things? And I look at a couple different things, and this is still an evolving process for me. But I take a look at a couple different things. First, how does the tool function? Does it actually meet the need we're talking about? So to your comment about the ideal situation you had, does this tool bring in information the way the instructor is envisioning that it's going to? Are they taking
Right.
questions?
Is it going to actually follow through?
Yeah. Is it going to follow through on that, or did it get a really shiny promotion that it takes in questions, but really she's looking at a fancy Excel sheet and can't figure out how to get to what she wants or capture data? How does that do that? Is it functional? But then I think a lot of people stop there. There's other things you have to take a look at. Is the tool accessible? So accessibility is a big conversation in ed tech right now, and in education. And there's varying degrees to how you meet that. Even the way I evaluate it, it's not like we have a hard stop of like, if it doesn't meet this accessibility, we don't use the tool. We're evaluating it in concert with what it's supposed to be doing. So sometimes I'm evaluating a tool like some kind of drawing digital tool, and it's not perfectly accessible for someone who has vision impairment, like the screen reader can't read it. Well, there's also the problem of it's a whiteboard tool that they're writing on an iPad anyway, so that's not, the tool in itself is just not accessible in the activity. So
Right.
we may approve that tool with the acknowledgement that like this activity needs to be accommodated because it can't
Right.
be.
Yeah, in the moment that that student gets that, is assigned that, we need to
Yeah,
work with that student to help them accomplish the learning goal without that activity, because they
yeah,
won't be able to see it if the point is to see something.
yeah.
If
So
we can describe it
like
effectively.
those we run into sometimes, but we're not like shutting them down. We're just acknowledging these problems with these tools. Now some we will. I like to and in my process I'm going to bring up a few that I have killed in our space, and here goes our sponsorships.
Pew, pew, pew.
Let me pick up an education favorite, okay? Prezi, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
Yep.
Prezi, the favorite presentation tool, right? I took that out back and shot it, okay? It came across our review in my workspace, and here's the why. It fails accessibility across the board. It does not do a good job of meeting accessibility. And so when we were evaluating the tool, we were like, this doesn't meet that need. And here's the other thing we evaluate. Do we already have tools that do that? Because here's the thing, I find it at tech, it's often the other thing we're evaluating is like, are we just throwing a new tool at the same thing that another tool does? And so for us, PowerPoint already did that. We use PowerPoint. Does it
Yeah.
do it perfectly? No. Is it magic and beautiful and moves
But
around
Josh,
like
what
Prezi
about the
does?
animation?
I know. No. But guess what PowerPoint does do? It's accessible. So we shut that one down pretty quick. We killed Prezi. Now there are other instructors and students using Prezi on their own, and which is fine. We just don't have it as a supported tool in our space, and that's where it's a little bit different. I'm evaluating things for actual supported tools across an online program of courses. As an individual instructor, you should still be looking at these things, but you're also I think the weight is a little bit different. Like when I approve a tool, that means a support structure has to support that tool now, and that is probably going to be going into multiple courses. If you as an individual teacher approve a tool, it's going into your class, like it's not going across
and
courses.
I guess for the viewers' sake, like I know that plays out, Josh, in the fact that if you put something into those programs, it might be in 3, 4, 5 courses at least. And if a student has an issue in one of those courses, or if students have an issue with that tool, it's going to affect 5 courses worth of students.
Yeah.
And you guys need to know that the support's there to help all of them.
Yeah.
Whereas if a teacher takes on Prezi for themselves in their course and they have a student that they need to accommodate, that teacher has had to support one student.
Yeah.
And so it's a scalability thing. And I agree with you. Every faculty member should feel comfortable to and should be encouraged to try something. If they need to try something, try it. But at a programmatic level, Josh and myself have been a part of the conversations. You just can't approve Prezi. It's not going to go in.
It's not going to go in. But you may use it in your own course with the one addendum that I will make. I hope you don't have to deal with any accessibility issues when you're providing a Prezi to someone, because screen readers aren't picking that up. And it's not going to meet that need. The last thing I check out that I say everyone should check out, I don't care about scalability. This is one thing that I feel like people are not carefully looking at all the time, and that is privacy, data protection, and like rights on a tool. Now I threw out a lot of kind of bigger fancy words, but really it's down to the core of the philosophy of the tool. What is their stuff? So to give you an idea of how I do this, I have gotten really good at reading terms of use agreements and privacy policies. You know, those things that we all just check off on our phone and we don't read carefully.
I agree to the terms and conditions.
Yeah, I agree to the terms and conditions. I do that on my phone. I don't do that when I'm picking ed tech, because you're giving student information a lot of times. So we do have to be careful about that. Like even on your own as an instructor, I think you have to be careful about what tools you pick. There's goodness gracious, this shows good research, but because I can't remember the name of the tool. Oh my goodness.
Talk me through it. What is it called? Like, what's it like? What's it do? I bet you I know it.
Plagiarism tool. Gosh, integrates.
Grammarly.
No, not Grammarly.
Oh no.
Integrates with Canvas. Come on.
Turn it in.
Turn it in. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Here's what I'm gonna trash some turn it in. Some turn it in's policies make it sound like they have ownership to the student's work. Like that's a problem in some of these tools. And so like you have to be careful to look at that. The other thing that I try to take a look at is while in high tech we love free, there's a problem sometimes with free tools.
Free is our aesthetic.
When tool is free, sometimes you're the product. Okay, like they're selling your data, and you may not care about that, but your students like should care about that. Some students will, and so you have to just be careful about what tools you're picking up.
A tool called Piazza was an early one in that space where I think this was always their model. They were pretty much free. It was very easy to use them, even integrated at my institution. And yet they had a system in there that would kind of profile the students and connect them to job opportunities. Like they would get mailers, newsletters, whatever job. So that means Piazza got paid by whoever was trying to get those students jobs, which it sounds good, right? Doesn't that? But did the students ever, with good knowledge, consent to that? And if I just told them to sign up for a course, for instance, it means I'm requiring a grade for their interaction. Is that not coercion? Now, do I not hold power over that person, making them do that, and they're choosing to do something that they may not want to do? That is, give Piazza their data and subject themselves to a third party that they don't want to be a part of. Like I get skeeved out by that, and Turnitin's got issues with it. I like that, at least in my institution with Turnitin, we've got the checkbox. The students cannot submit their stuff to the repository. That was a good fix for that. Grammarly, we got dinged with this early. Grammarly was another one that got dinged for that early.
Problem.
And
they had a similar statement.
If you read their policies today, it's like, we do not own it. You know, like they have.
Yeah, they were very clear. They backed off that hard because they got burned by that. But the point of all of this, like we're going through all these pieces, is like, is just take a careful look at the apps that you're pulling in as an instructor, whether you're evaluating like I am, of bringing multiple tools into like programs of courses, or you're even just looking at tools that you're gonna bring into your space. Take a look. I know it's annoying, but read the terms of use, read the privacy policies. You don't have to read all of it. Usually you can skip ahead to the section where they start talking about this person owns this type of thing, or a couple of those things. Like take a look at those and then just test the tool out. This is the one thing that I find faculty sometimes skip ahead on. They're so intent on doing what they want to do with a tool that they don't actually test it to make sure that it does everything they want it to do. Or
but it says it does it.
Or you make assumptions about how it works. And so I see this all the time. People making assumptions that like a certain tool does this, and then when it doesn't, they get frustrated or they get burnt by it. But really, if you had done a little bit more testing on the tool, you would have probably found that out.
The number one of those is, and you have reports, right? I mean, how many times have I read something gives reports, and then the faculty member downloads a report and it's a CSV file and it's all these tables and columns.
Oh yeah,
they just can't make
it's
sense
an Excel file and they have no idea what it is, and they're annoyed at the tool. Well, you should have looked at what
I had that conversation today with what is this? What, like, literally sent me a screenshot of this Excel file and said, what am I looking at? I was like, that's columns and rows, and each row,
the data. And so I think it's a good way of taking a look at it and just being careful. Like another good example, because I think the way to talk through this the best is like giving some of those examples. Like I just today had to review a tool called SmartDraw for instructor who wanted to have their students basically design a floor plan, okay, and submit that to our LMS Canvas. And here was why we denied SmartDraw. SmartDraw, and this is classic in education, has a 7-day free trial, and you can use SmartDraw for that 7-day free trial. But after those 7 days, it shuts the account down, and the person does not have access to what they created unless they pay. And this is my favorite. They don't have a monthly. They only do yearly, $120 a year to use the tool. And I have an instructor asking to use this with their students. The reason I denied it is because that's an immediate issue. your students are going to get shut out after 7 days.
Yep.
If they don't get things done on time,
I
and
had
they may
instructors.
accidentally pay. Like you may
Yeah,
have your
that's it.
students accidentally paying $120 for a tool that you want them to create a floor plan for one activity.
Yep.
And so we denied it because there's other tools that do that. We've referenced some of them on this podcast. Miro can do it and has education policies. Lucidchart can do it and has education policies. So like it takes just some careful thought
Yeah.
to realize that this tool is not the best solution. And that's why we shut it down. Not because we just want to like hold back ideas or things. It's because there is a lot of technology, and we need to carefully evaluate it. There's a lot of tools that I've pushed through that we've talked about here, Coggle, other tools that I've allowed to come through. Why? Because they're useful tools. They're easy for the student to use. They have good policies around how they manage student data, and what they do. And students aren't going to get charged after 7 days to use the tool.
Yeah.
Like those are good things. I think we have to care for our students, by carefully looking at the technology that we use, because not all technology is good.
And I want to kind of pivot to a point / wrap with a point that this is not easy. And like Josh is saying, he's sitting there sleeping and taking naps on end user license agreements. Like you don't even know what a EULA is. That's fine. You don't need to. Go find an instructional designer. We love doing this. Go find an instructional technologist. Go find a Josh. Go find a Will in your system who can help you with this, because it's not easy and there are too many. And there's plenty of people out there who want to help. But if you are looking to get into some of this yourself, I want to give you 2 websites. And of course, this is stuff will get linked in and stuff. Commonsense.org. Commonsense.org is a kind of a modern movement. I think they might be completely focused on ed tech, but they do a lot of evaluation of ed tech, learning curriculum, things like that. So you can get into their site. You can literally plug in like Nearpod, Coggle, whatever, and it brings up examples of other ones like it, and they rate them. And they have some of these categories that Josh was referencing, so you can see if they're accessible or not. You can get some of that kind of like privacy related information out of them. A new one that's coming out. So Common Sense is very K-12 oriented, a very, very new one. It literally says beta on its page today here in March 2021. If you open it up, is coursegateway.org. And this one's coming up in the higher education space. So the apps will probably be more relevant to what you're expecting to see. And some of the language and design is going to be more higher ed focused. You can search products. They've got reviews. They're doing what Josh and I do to kind of do that due diligence. So those are just 2 sites, right, to be aware of that can help you address these questions if you don't have the time to go in depth, if you don't know what to look for, or if you don't have instructional design resources available to you.
Yeah, that's a good plug. That's there's resources out there to look it up, that can help you do some of the evaluation and what you're looking at. I think you're not alone in the ed tech world. You're not alone either to do all of this. Like Google a tool is a great starting point. Looking at these tools these websites were suggesting, you'll eventually find out if there are problems in what's going on. It's just, I think, taking that second to carefully evaluate. And my last plug would be definitely do what we're talking about if the publisher that you're working with advertised the tool to you. That's my last note about all of this. If you remember anything about what I've said today, is that if your publisher for a book that you're using promises you a silver bullet tool, please take a look at these things that we've suggested. Because those are often my most problematic ones.
I've got to second that. All right, let's pivot.
Yeah.
No crafty segue for this one. The tool of the day, the app of the day, is actually one that Josh and I have had a lot of fun with in this space. Whether it's approved or denied, and how we'll use it and how we won't use it, right? This is a tool that one of Josh's colleagues, one of my former colleagues, and I came across 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6, and we really, really liked the idea of it. Hypothesis. So its website is hypothes.is. Hypothesis. Wonderful concept, wonderful tool, and the idea being that you plug something into it. You plug the web into it, and you can annotate anything. It is a web browser. You can go to the New York Times. You can go to an article in the New York Times. You can have your Hypothesis extension in your Google Chrome, your Safari, your Brave, your Firefox, whatever. You can click and drag a couple of words, and immediately right there, Hypothesis turns on and says, do you want to highlight this or annotate this? Then you can highlight it so you can see it for yourself and you can come back to it at a later time. Other people using Hypothesis can see your annotations as well. And then, or you can comment on it. You can actually, right there with the real World Wide Web right in front of you, start a conversation about anything you can read. And frankly, if we stopped there, I'm just amazed. It's awesome. I love it. I want it, right? It does have some good educational functions, right? They've got some groupings that you can do. You can invite people to groups, so you can keep your annotations public or private to just a group, because by default everything's public. Anything you post can be seen by any other Hypothesis user. So it's nice to know for educational purposes. You could lock things down to smaller groups. You could change, you could set up hashtag systems so students can track information down by lessons, and you can do a lot of good organization of content. And for your personal use, I've met people now who use Hypothesis literally to like track information about vacations. They use it as like a World Wide Web bookmarker of everything. Most of your bookmarks, right, are just grabbing a link, putting it in a folder in your browser. This is not only getting a link, but highlighting the picture, highlighting the text underneath of it, putting a comment on things, putting a note for yourself why you liked it or remembered it, wanted to remember it. And it's just really awesome. I love it. However, when we want to integrate that into an educational situation, we come back to, free is our aesthetic here. It was free for a very long time, completely free, no strings attached. I think you could maybe you could donate money to them. I don't even know how they got money early.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
But clearly the money ran out.
Yep.
And they had to start charging a fee. Josh, what was the fee? How did this work out?
Here's the thing. I don't actually remember the fee. That's how frustrating this entire situation was. And I'm looking up on their page now just to find some more information about Hypothesis, about what their pricing was. And just for context, while we're talking about Hypothesis, there's two pieces to Hypothesis. There is the Chrome extension and kind of bookmarking tool that Will is talking about here, and that is completely free, and has always been free. There's an LMS app that integrates with your LMS, so Canvas, Schoology, Brightspace, Moodle. They've even got Sakai on there and Blackboard that'll integrate with the tool. And that's what most people wanted to use because at least in my experience in education, because the Chrome extension, while was nice, made students go other places. It wasn't quite as smooth.
Right.
It's nice when you're doing it or you have a classroom that you're doing it with, that you can do it easily. But in a lot of spaces, people wanted to use this more in a hybrid online area because of what it provided. And it was frustrating to have to go instruct the students on how to download the extension, install it. Some students don't even know that there are extensions in Chrome. There's
a lot of background prep.
So what we experienced on our end is we integrated the LMS app because it was free. And then our wonderful coworker, I don't know how he did it, accidentally registered our student worker or something for the contact. So we did not find out that it was not free anymore until much later in the process. And the confusing part about this tool was that they weren't giving us clarity on what it cost. They gave us numbers, but then told us it didn't cost anything anymore because there seemed to be a negative reaction. And now their site basically just says, contact us to discuss pricing about the LMS app. So that's kind of where it went. in that space. And Will and I laugh about this because we both have slightly like Will loves this tool. I really liked Hypothesis as well. I was the person at our office that, with the work of my director as well too, that shut the door on Hypothesis pretty hard when this all happened.
I believe the word is slammed the door, sir.
I mean, we may have had a task in our system that was like burn Hypothesis from the LMS.
Eradicate. And,
like
and to be fair,
eradicate.
And to be fair, I do love this tool. And hey, this is how these app conversations are going to go from time to time. Like, we're not here. We're not sponsored by any of these apps yet.
Yeah, we're not always going to promote something to you can use every single time. Yeah.
What I like about it, I have it installed in my personal browser. I use it sometimes just for me, just because I'm interested in annotating something, putting a comment, seeing what other people are putting out there in the Hypothesis community. I think it's a better social media app in general. Go ahead, use it yourself, get interested. I've come up with another app that's a competitor to this tool that I think is so much better for and designed for education first with a better pricing policy. Hey, going to save that for another episode. We don't need to dig into it.
Yeah, we're not going to talk
It's
about
perfect,
that here.
right? But if you're going to use Hypothesis, I recommend using it for personal purposes. It's really great for tracking the internet, writing down your bookmarks, keeping kind of the internet organized in one place, because you just log into your Hypothesis account and you can see everything you've annotated, anything you've marked, anywhere you've gone in the internet. It's really, I think, a good bookmarking system.
Yeah. And I would encourage you, like, if you're in a situation where you're an instructor and you're able to do this, like, I think it's fine to use in a class where you're in contact with your students a lot. Where my concern was in an online or hybrid area, there's this other difficulty, and this comes into evaluating apps, that a lot of, I think, people don't think through, is that you are not meeting with your students like every single week necessarily. And so what often happens is in implementing and integrating an app or an idea into a course becomes more difficult because you can't consistently be there to help talk them through it. And students won't always email you when they have problems. They will when it's conflicting with their ability to submit their assignment, but they will wait till the last possible second to tell you that there's a problem. They often won't like email you ahead of time to let you know that something wasn't working. And so like that was some of our concern with Hypothesis. And that's in an evaluation of a tool. Our concern was, is this a long-term tool that we can keep using? We were afraid that at any moment a Hypothesis would stop being the price it was. It would be way too much for us to use, and then we'd have to unintegrate it through all the activities that we had put it into.
It's pretty volatile. At that time, it's definitely pretty volatile.
I think to that point, though, we'll talk about a tool that I think is a competitor later on about this that we're still even kind of, I think, evaluating a little bit ourselves because it's newer to even Will. It's newer to me because Will told me about it. So like, although I had one of my team members already give a brief evaluation of it, and I have that on my docket to take a look at. But the one thing I will say that I really love about this, and I hope more tools go this direction, is this annotating discussion concept. This idea that one of the great things about Hypothesis was that you could integrate it and students could annotate PDFs together. They could discuss it live online together. They were commenting on things. It was really nice to be able to do that. You could do that on web pages too. You could literally comment on websites. I think there's so much that could be done with an app like that, where like you can actually literally comment and write in a text that you're working in. You're in an English course, you're evaluating a book that you're reading or you're working through, or you're catching things. You can literally have the book on the screen and be commenting inside the book. This is a place where like we talk about integration, right? This is something that could transform an activity, not just enhance it, because you're discussing a book live. You're trying to figure out the page number. You're not doing that in an annotation tool like this. You're literally looking at the page number. It's right there while you're discussing it on it. It's highlighting elements of it. So I'm excited about this idea, and I hope more of these tools start to emerge with this concept of annotating, because I think it brings something new to the discussion world that's been a constant problem in discussions, which is like you're posting about something without actually looking at the thing you're posting about. It creates this disconnectedness that's going on in kind of that online format that we don't.
And at a learning level, that like read this, go somewhere else to synthesize and respond. It separates those practices. Like I have to read on a time and I have to create on a time. And this integrates, like you're saying, this integrates to say at the same time you're reading, also be considering its implication and synthesize that response.
Yeah.
You know, whatever your prompt is. And there's a space for both. Sometimes I think there needs to be a revitalization of reading for learning, just reading for learning, intentional reading. I think that we lose a lot of that, and so many textbooks are being optional or tech. You know, like so much is happening in text today with learning. I think we need some space there. But this is something that I think can drive us back to it and help students even realize how much more valuable the text is. Because if you go through and pre-fill some annotations, so you go through your chapter for the week and you as the teacher highlight a few things but no comments, at least as the students are reading it, they're looking for your highlights and wondering, why did the teacher highlight this? Yeah. It's and like, then as they start asking questions of each other, they can see why each other's thinking about the text as they're going through it.
Yeah, it's like taking the concept of like writing in the margins of your book and making it a collaborative effort in a way that turns into discussion. You know how you kind of argue with the author? Well, now you can argue with the author while you're arguing with everyone else in the class at the same time.
Sounds like a great time to me. This is a Friday night.
So some of you may be listening to this session right now and be like, okay, should I use hypothesis or shouldn't I? Because they feel torn on it to me. And you're right. We are. You know what our recommendation is? I don't know. We don't have all the answers.
Right. Try it out. It's out
there. Yeah, I would encourage you in the right context, try it out. If you're in a context like you have someone like me who has to evaluate some of these tools for you, don't get angry at them when they say no, because I will tell you this, from a replicatable solution across multiple courses, hypothesis does not meet that need for us, and that's why we don't use it anymore. If I was teaching my own course and had only myself to worry about and my students, I'd probably still give it a try because I like the tool.
Right.
And I think we have one or two of that. I think our coworker who found hypothesis is still using the extension to do stuff in his own courses, which is fine. Just as long as he knows that if they email us, they're not getting
We're
help.
Forwarding it to him.
Yeah, it's forwarding it to him. But that's with that understanding, it's in there. Now we'll recommend, preview. I think we're probably gonna have a tool that down the road could be a good final solution, like good solution that hypothesis unfortunately did not meet for us because they have some more stability on their end. And I know how much it costs. That's a thing.
and to be fair to hypothesis I think is trying to de-platform the experience. So they want you to be able to use hypothesis wherever you are in the internet. And this is a tool that is trying to create a platform for social annotation. So there's a different goal in their missions, and I think that's okay. But for an educational purpose with a classroom, we'll have something that I think can follow up a bit better than that. All right, so that's the app for this week. We really appreciate you taking the time with us to think that through, and we'll be back here to wrap things up in just a moment. Okay, so we're checking out of the library for the week. This has been a fun conversation. We got bookish. We got into a bit of more nerd stuff. We do appreciate, as always, you jump in the saddle with us as we look to harness technology both in the digital and physical classroom. We really think that there's a lot more to be found across tools and even the works that we're reading. So we hope to bring that back to you next week. Just want to take a moment to say so long. Thanks for all the fish.
See ya.